Hello everybody, Brett Tadlock here, TN Artist. Hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you're at in the world. I want to thank you for joining me. I'm so happy that you're here. So we're going to work on a painting today in Rebelle 6. And if you have Rebelle 5, you can also do this exact same painting. And so quite a bit of what I'm doing you could do in a few other programs. There will be some things that are going to be Rebelle centric, but some of the techniques and everything else you can follow along with. If you don't have Rebelle 6, I definitely recommend checking it out. It is a one-time purchase that you can get it for, and it's really not too bad. If you have bought Rebelle 5 recently, at the time of recording this, there actually are some discounts that they're giving. Everything from free to upgrade, with if you bought it within a certain time period, to like a 50% off to upgrade. Definitely worth upgrading. There are quite a few additions to it that make it worth it. So definitely check it out. But anyway, let me show you what I've got going on here on the canvas, kind of bring you up to speed on all that so we can jump right into it. So here on my canvas, I have an 8x10, or actually 10x8 canvas set up at 150 DPI. And I do that at 150 because I'm recording, so my recording software doesn't really like me going at a much higher resolution while it's recording. They'll tend to mess with each other. Just a limitation of my computer, not the software's. I have over here on the palette, I have the color set that is the oil set that you can download from Escape Motions on their website. So you can get this here. I'm just going with this one because it's a nice standard one, very vibrant colors, which I happen to love. And it's a good place to start where everybody can start with it. My brushes that I have over here, I do have some of my brushes set on here, which are my landscape brushes and so forth. And then I also have those saved over here in my favorites where I have those. So, which is one of the cool things I think about Rebelle 6 is adding this little favorites tab right here, because then I can have in here like my express oils, my watercolors, and all that stuff instead of having to switch back and forth between all these. So that's kind of a nice thing. But over here are all the standard brushes that come with it, and they're in here. So if you don't have my brushes, you can definitely use theirs. There are quite a few good ones in here that they've set up, so I think they go along really, really well with everything. So I've pretty much got everything over here set to default. For that, I do have the brush creator over on another screen, so that way if I want to use it, I have it there. And I also have all my stencils over on the other screen as well, so that way if I want to use all of them, then I can jump in here. And I probably will use some of these because I find that stencils are just a great way to save a lot of time and give me a lot of nice effects that I can build off of. So those are over here. So if you've watched any of my stuff before, you know that I use these and recommend doing so, either making your own or just buying my mega pack that I have over on Gumroad, whichever, totally up to you. Okay. So those are here, but I keep them over here on another monitor as well, so I can keep this kind of clean while we're working on stuff. I have the true pigment on, so that means all of my paints are going to mix in a more true fashion. And I have everything set up so I can do a nanopixel export of my canvas here. And that way if I want to do prints out of everything, then I can. It works out just great because I have basically exported it 4 times its size. And then I can bring it back down to 16x20, which is my most popular print size for clients. And it comes out nice. It turns out really, really well. And so recommend doing it. Anyway, so let's get started with a painting. So the first thing I want to do here is kind of get rid of this off-white canvas. I do always start with an off-white, so that way I can kind of see more clearly what my brightest brights are and my darkest darks, but I'm going to get rid of this canvas because we just need to, have some different color here. So I'm going to work on a sunset / sunrise over some water with some rocks and so forth, because I thought that might give us a good mix of textures to work on and some different techniques that you can then apply to everything. So what I want to do right now is just work on laying in my background and everything else. So I'm going to grab maybe some of this Prussian blue, and the brush that I have right now is actually, it's by default, it's one of my tree brushes. So let me change that real quick. I'm going to switch over to, let's go with maybe the flat oily. Yeah, that'll work. And what we're going to do is we're just going to lay in some color here and there. Okay. Then I'm going to switch down here to my cerulean blue. lay that in as well. By the way, I forgot to mention that on the other screen, one other screen, because I actually have 3 monitors going. The other one I have this preview panel, so I can see what it looks like on 2 different monitors to get a good feel for what the final print would look like. Grab a little bit of that Paris blue, which has a little bit more purplish color. Some of the outside here. And let's see, I'll grab a little bit of this cobalt, like so. Turquoise. So kind of lighten this up a little bit. We grab a little bit of this Naples yellow, kind of come in through here, about where our sunset would be. Maybe a little bit of this orange in here as well. And back to this cobalt turquoise, and come down to where it's lighter. Not quite light enough. We are going to lighten these up quite a bit. There we go. I don't know if you can hear my cat yowling in the background, but for whatever reason he's decided to start singing the song of his people. So, I don't know. He's perfectly fine. But he just does this every now and then. I think he's trying to find his sister. Where have you gone? Why have you abandoned me? All right, so I've got all those in there and laid in. So now what I want to do is I can either stay here and I can go to 4 or select blend here. And then I can just kind of scrub on these. So if I want to keep some of that texture from the brush, I can just kind of scrub these around. Okay, I'm going to use my right bracket key to come up in size. And now I'm just going to kind of smear all this together, and I'm just going to make some quick strokes. Like so. Then I'm going to go over here to my blend tool. We'll go with the soft one. And I'm just now, this would be like if you were doing traditional oil paints, this would be like taking a clean, dry 2-inch brush. And again, just lightly going back and forth. I'm not applying a lot of pressure with my pen tool, so that way it's just keeping it rather soft and knocking out some of these brush strokes. If you want to keep them, keep them. Totally up to you. I just want to kind of soften this a little bit, because we're going to go back and add clouds. So but you can see by just having those colors gives you some really interesting blends and gradations, because most people don't realize when you look at a sunset, most people think of yellows and oranges and purples and pinks and blues. There's actually green in there. If you take a look, you'll see like this really soft greenish color that's in there, because remember, a rainbow is Roy G. Biv, so red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. So you will see all of that, because a sunset really is a rainbow just kind of stretched out across the sky for the most part, especially if there's clouds, because the atmosphere is going to kind of mess with it too. So okay, so I think that kind of gives us a nice blend. If you want to soften it more, definitely do so. Take your time and do so. Get a few of the last brush strokes out. There we go. Okay, so I think that will work for that. And now I want to add to this. I want to put a little bit of more orange through here. And then we're going to have some clouds kind of sweep up. So I'm going to go back to my brushes here. I mean, we could even switch down to a knife brush, or let's try the knife stain. How does that look? So we've got this orange on here now. Let's take a look and see how that is. Helps if we actually get off of 4, so we're putting down paint. So that's interesting. We're going to get kind of a smearing of colors. with that. Don't think I'm going to keep it though. Don't like how that one looked. So let's try knife smooth. Now this is one of those things where you're going to get blending, which works great in Rebelle because you get that natural blend. But if you want even more control, don't be afraid to put this on another layer by itself. Okay? We can get some of this in here. Alright, so again, we can soften it. I'm going to bring my left bracket key to bring that down. And just kind of fade this around. So, okay, so that's going to start giving us a nice fade into these other colors that we have here. So now what I want to do is maybe grab a little cad yellow, maybe kind of drop some of that in here, kind of streak it up. Going back, soften it. And now we're starting to get some of that layered across. Now these colors over here, if we kind of streak these a little bit, that's going to give the indication of maybe some diffused clouds. Okay? So don't be afraid to do that. So now for the clouds, let's talk about that for a minute as far as composition and everything. Okay, so I'm going to make a new layer here so I can kind of draw on this layer. So I know for my composition, I'm planning on having mountains come down and then kind of come across and then come over. Okay, and then I'm going to reflect that down here in water and kind of have a similar thing. So we'll have kind of an overall X pattern. Okay, let me draw this real quick if that helps. So we'll have mountains kind of coming down, kind of something like this, and maybe some distant ones as well. Okay, then some more coming up, and then like I said, we'll reflect some of that in the water. Okay, so we've got here. So I also want to have some clouds that kind of sweep in like so, and sweep in like so. So that's going to give me a very focused composition that kind of brings me towards here in the middle, but off a little bit, because I'm going to add some light over here that's kind of coming out. That's going to pull our eye here, and I'm going to have some light kind of cascade across these hills over here, which will then be reflected and stuff. So it's going to bring all of our eye to right about here in the painting, and that's kind of what I want. I want somebody to be able to journey into it and be pulled into it, and then just kind of from there go around and look around. So that's where we're going compositionally. Okay, and you want to always kind of think about that kind of stuff. What are we doing compositionally to get this to look right and kind of feel right? So that's where we're going. Okay, so let me get this out of the way. So with that in mind, let's add some clouds that I think would be rather dynamic. So let's come over here to this pyrrole red and click on it. Now that's all the way over here, but what I really want is a little bit more towards here. So we've got some of this purplish color kind of blended into it, and we've got some of that. So I'm going to go with this. And there's the code for it, so that way if you want to copy it, okay? So I'm going to put it on here so you can see it. So let's kind of lay that in. I'm going to grab, let's see here, I'm going to grab one of my brushes. We'll go with like an old brush. Now I want these to kind of sweep out and come down like so. This is going to help give that illusion of perspective. So something like that. I'm going to push 4 and make this a blending brush now. And now what I'm going to do is just lightly feather these streaks. Something along the lines of this. Okay. Now the key thing to notice here, notice that all of these strokes are still pointing perspective-wise down. Okay, so I'm not going straight across, but they are kind of gradually going here and kind of turning to become flatter, but I don't want to start off with them super flat. Okay, so something like that. So now I'm going to go back to 1. I'm going to add just a few more streaks kind of coming in. And I'm just kind of letting this randomly hit and take whatever it wants. And I'll go back to 4. And again, just softly go back over these. Really just kind of let it smudge out. You want these to be soft, kind of wispy clouds, so don't overwork it and get rid of it. But give it enough blend where it looks like those wispy clouds that you see sometimes. Something like that. I'm actually going to soften these out a little more because they're still a little dark. Like that. Okay. Alright, so that's giving us kind of a cool look. Now let's jump over here to this orange that I have. Okay, so this orange here. And we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of lay this in. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. It helps if I actually click on the yellow. Add a little bit of yellow. A little bit of that red. Maybe just a little of that pinkish color too. Now I'm going to hit 4 again. And I'm going to soften it. really kind of soften some of these streaks back out of it. Blend more into the bottom. I'm going to soften these just a little bit too. You can soften this down as much as you want. Like if you want it really blended down and stuff, you could definitely do that. Have almost an airbrushed kind of look to it. I want to keep some of the drama of it in here, so I'm not going to completely soften it out, but I'm going to make sure it kind of blends into the background a little bit, like so. Okay. I think that's given us some interesting look and depth. So I'm going to save this real quick. Okay, so again, everything we've done so far, you can do in Rebelle 5 or Rebelle 6. Okay, so nothing really crazy. Now, if I wanted to use some of the cool stuff that's in Rebelle 6, say for example, I wanted to get a little bit more dynamic look with these clouds, I could come here to the transform tool and the new warp. And so if I wanted to kind of play around with some of this and kind of move it, twist, so that I get more of that. You know, like say my perspective was off and I was like, oh, I really want to change this around. More of a feel, then I definitely could. Which to me is really neat because it allows, it's one of the things that you love about working with digital is the fact that you can quickly edit and change stuff around versus when I was working traditional, if I didn't like that or the client didn't like it, I'd have to repaint it, you know. So this way I can just kind of tweak it and twist it and adjust it. So, but other than that, you know, everything else that we've done, you can easily do in Rebelle 5. Okay. But I think that's one of the cool things about 6 is being able to add in some of these interesting, you know, twists and turns. Okay. So just something to think about. So now we've got these here. So what we can do now is I want to add in, I'm going to come back to this. So this is still very much the underpainting. Okay. All this is the underpainting. So I'm going to come back in a little bit and add some more to highlight some of these areas and pull some more clouds into here and give this even more depth to it. But for right now, what I want to do is I am going to take this layer here, T for trans, I'm going to flip it vertically. Well, that's kind of psychedelic. I'm just going to bring it down because we're going to have some water. Okay. So I want that reflection to kind of be there, like so. And I can do it later with these clouds too. I'll probably wait and do it on these somewhat until I get these more, you know, fleshed out for exactly how I want it to be. But for this part here, I'm going to go after these two because that is what I need. And now I want to look at putting in the foreground. So let's do a little bit of maintenance here on our layers. So that way we can do it because we're going to add more layers. I know some people, like I tend to work in fewer layers. If I do find myself making a lot of layers, I'll usually collapse them down. And I think it's just leftover from working traditionally. But some people work in a lot of layers, some people work in little. It doesn't really matter. It's totally up to you. There are purists out there who are like, you have to work in as few as possible. And it's like, no, you don't. It's just that simple. No, you don't. All right, so I'm going to go to the freehand. I'm also going to go to the add to selection option. And we're going to use the freehand selection tool to kind of draw in an idea of where I want to put some. This bottom part I'm not worried about yet. I'll clean this up, but I'm not really worried about that. I'm going to make this a little more jagged, kind of sloping. That's why I use the additive, because I can just then kind of add to this profile of it. Add some interest. To do so. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab this pinkish color, but I'm going to drop down, come more purplish color. Build this. I'm going to actually wet the layer too. Okay. Grab the square. I'm going to do the. Actually, I'll tell you what. I can just do Control D and deselect. So I'm just going to go back to here and bring this up. Because that's going to flatten out my shoreline. D. But see how that instantly starts giving you a little bit more of a play on where everything is, you know. Now I do know that back here behind this I want to add a few more mountains and stuff. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the freehand. I want to adjust this. I think this is a little, I want to kind of trim off this shoreline and have it really kind of come down like so. That to me is more interesting. Steep cliffs, then go with the steep looking cliffs. I kind of like that. So let's drop below this one and add a new layer. Let's add in mountains just for give us a little bit of distance. Now I'm going to tap on this color here. I'm just going to come up a little bit. I'm going to go back to hit L and go back to my fill bucket, and I'm going to lay that in. Okay, so see, by having that, as stuff gets further away, it's going to get lighter. So that gives that feeling of that really softening out. Okay, so we've got that. I'll tell you what, I think we may even just add another layer, because I kind of like the idea of that. So let's maybe something here. Repeat my patterns too much. Come across. Okay. Let's come way down further. L. Let's go one step down, not quite black. So that gives us, it's going to push that back a little more. Now I'm going to straighten up this shoreline. So we're going to come in. If you have it tilted, it's going to look like it's like everything's falling off your canvas. So that's why I'm straightening this out. However, let me show you something real quick. That does not mean that it has to just be a straight line. Okay, we can have some interesting effects. It's just that the overall has to be straight. Okay, so let me delete that. All right, so that's going to give us that really crisp, clean, straight across. But if I want to have this layer come down some, so let me grab my, just an oil brush. That knife smooth is fine. To have that kind of continue down. Actually, that's going to be, let's go to marker. Bullet. So that can come across, and then I can, oops, sorry, hit the wrong button. So now that can come down, but then I can take Okay, so that's really rough and crude, but I wanted to do it that way to give you the idea. But see how the bottom of that is horizontal? So that makes it feel flat, but it still brings it out towards you. So it's like a shoreline coming out towards you. Because again, that perspective, I could even curve that around if I wanted to. And I might, I don't know. But it gives you that same kind of feel for it. I'm going to soften this back a little bit. Whoops. I hit delete by accident. This because I don't want the texture there right now. Alright, so that gives us our mountains for where we're going to have that. Once we get these finished up, we're going to reflect them down here. Okay. One thing I do want is I want to have some rocks down here. So let's just kind of quickly lay in something for rocks. And I'll just grab a, let's try the hard round. I think that'd be more like a filbert brush. So let's just kind of lay in where some rocks might be. Notice how they're larger and getting smaller. Perspective. Ta-ta. Today's painting is brought to you by the letter P for perspective. All right. I may end up adding more, less, I don't know. But one thing to notice how these are, they're not completely flat because I'm going to do a lot more painting to them. But notice how they are kind of flat and they are kind of horizontal. They're staying in that same plane, which makes them feel like they're dropping back. Okay. And these are a good path, almost literally, path into the painting, which will bring you up and around and then back in through here because you're going to want to look around through there. So again, composition. Okay. All right. So that gives us that part. So let's do a little bit of layer management here. So we got distant mountains. We've got midground mountains. Foreground. And we've got rocks. Okay. So that gives us some ideas of where we can do it. And the main reason to do it like this is because then if I want to drop in stuff like, say, ripples, I want to do, ripples for the water. Well, I know I can drop that into here below the rocks so that it fits, So it gives me an idea of where to put stuff. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So let's work on adding some texture back here to these distant mountains. And then we'll add some to these, and we'll add some of those, then we'll come back and add some on the clouds. Mountains. I'm going to go ahead and turn on lock transparency. And for this, I may go with, let's try the marker. I don't really use the markers as much as I'd like to. And there's new ones here in Rebelle 6. So like I have these luminosity and burn and color and hue. I'm looking forward to playing with these. Of course, we got the bullet, the dry, the chisel and all that. Let's try the dry. And all I'm going to do is hold Alt and select that color. And I'm going to come up here. And I'm going to go down, desaturate, come down a little bit, take some of the color out of it. Come up a little bit. And now I just want to lightly kind of stroke in there. Now this is giving some of the canvas texture there. You see how I've got those bumps? You've got to decide if you like those or not. Okay, with a little more pressure, I can get rid of them. But you have to decide. So I'm going to lower my opacity down to about 15 or so. And I'm going to apply a decent amount of pressure so I don't have those bumps. And that's going to start building up some soft, almost kind of foggy areas. I'm also going to grab a little bit of this orangish color. And lightly add some of that in on it too. A couple of reasons for that. One, it's going to give the feeling that there's light hitting it, which is important. Two, these are complementary colors, so it's going to give it a little bit of vibrancy, a little bit of and what I mean by that is it's going to give that feeling. When you put complementary colors next to each other, it makes them feel like they are literally vibrating. Your brain kind of perceives it that way, and so that's going to give that. Now I'm going to go to 4. Just going to kind of soften some of these in. I may even bring the opacity up because that's going to affect how much it softens it. This is almost like if you've ever had a blending marker that has like some of the solution in it, which could be water, it could be alcohol or whatever, like if you're using Coptic markers or whatever, like the blending marker. By increasing the opacity, it gives me more of the blending fluid, if you will, and allows it to blend more. So I can do. Now I'm going to also grab my freehand. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on here. I want to do a couple things. I want to first of all do that because I'm separating these two out from each other. I'm going to go back to my marker and grab a little bit of this pinkish color, drop it in there, grab a little bit of that purplish color, drop it in there, and now I'm going to hit 4. I'm going to blend those together, and then what I want to do is grab a little bit of ultramarine blue, but I want it to be darker. Maybe less saturated. I'm going to come along the top there. I'm going to pull straight down. What that's going to do is give me a distinction and give me some feeling of stuff really kind of playing around. So I'm going to do just a little bit more with some of the yellow. 4, like that. Okay. Now what I want to do is Control D and back to my selection tool. I'm going to select this and kind of repeat the process. I missed a spot right there. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of repeat that and lay this in here. So I'm going to grab Alt and select that color once I hit marker. I'm going to go back to there. Come back down to the darker part of it. I'm going to throw some of that in there. Now if you want, you can add a lot of texture here to kind of not add a lot of texture. You don't want to add a lot of texture because that'll bring it forward. Anyway, you can just mix it up, like I've left a spot here and a spot there is what I'm trying to say. So if you want to do that here and there, that's going to give the indication of texture without killing your illusion of depth. Something like that. Hit 4. I'm going to drop this down, really kind of smear it. That. Shift Control I for a second. Control D. Let's see how that kind of pushes those and brings us forward and so forth. So one final time, like so. Now we're going to do for this one, back to the marker. You can do this with the airbrush too, by the way. Kind of lay this in here. Shapes and twists and turns. Hit 4. Oops. Hit 4, not E. And just kind of soften it. I think I would still like to bring in just a hint of some of that orangish color. so. And there we go. We've got some mountains off in the distance. And again, you can play with these, push them, pull them, twist them, turn them as much as you want. I'll probably add more stuff into it, but again, this is underpainting, so don't go too crazy with it. So now in these mid-ground mountains, let's add some to, and we want these to be kind of rocks and stuff, so this is where I'm going to use some of my stencils, because this is going to make life a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my stencils on the other screen, and I'm going to go to rocks, and I'm going to grab this one here, this rock 1, which in my Gumroad set, this has actually been modified in my Gumroad, so it's a little different. Actually, I think it's better, to be honest. So I'm going to twist it, and I'm going to turn off lock size ratio. I'm going to kind of stretch it. Twist it, turn it, stretch it. If anybody remembers that commercial. All right, so again on here, these mid-ground mountains, I'm going to lock transparency. And I'm going to grab that color. I'm going to come over just to the yellowish side. This is going to be very soft. And I'm going to switch brushes. One of my favorites. I'm going to go with dry brush. See how that looks. There, very soft, very subtle. Lighten that just a smidge. There we go. So part of the reason I use these is because I can quickly drop in this texture, which I can do this texture without that stencil. Okay, so like I can do it through here if I want to. And I just kind of like using that to kind of quickly throw it in and then see what I want to change. But this, this brush works great. Actually, I've got a mountain knife right here. Looks good, but it does add texture. And I'm getting a little bit of lag from my software, so I'm just going to kind of soften that back. Like so. Okay. And we can put the main thing with this is notice that I'm going this direction over here and this direction over here for the most part. Not 100%, but enough to get that kind of feel. So that's given us a nice, quick, easy, rough kind of a feel to it. So now let's jump to this one. Eject it. Lock transparency. We're going to bring this back down a little bit because this is so dark. Almost exact kind of concept. Just the main thing with it is don't lose all your darks. You want this to stay darker. Blobs, nothing really planned here. Now I'm going to come from there back over to this bluish color. I've changed it, and it's going to be soft and subtle, but it'll give a little bit slightly different feel. Like maybe there's some rocks and stuff down here, some boulders or something, just from that little touch of blue. Bring that down in size. Again, don't lose all your dark, but do play around with it. I could even go from here, I could go into this green I could switch to maybe my bush brush here and bring that size down and lay in some green, like there's maybe some dark shrubs and stuff there. But by keeping these in the same value, you know, meaning light to dark, it fits. Okay, it kind of blends in. Now once I've got that there, I could even soften some of it by going to 4, because I don't want a whole lot of detail. I just want some indication of stuff. But now that gives our eyes something to look at. Kind of starts writing a story, because your eye will start, the viewer's eye will start trying to say, well, what is that? What is that? Is that grass? Is that rocks? And it gives that intrigue to make them look at it longer. Okay, very subtle. I can even come back to the midgrounds. I could grab a little bit of this yellowish color and take it over slightly more yellow, maybe towards that green. Tell it okay. And then I could add in some rough spots here and there. Again, stuff that looks like foliage. Hit 4, kind of soften it on the bottom. I could even, if I wanted to, get crazy now. I'm going to get crazy. Let's say we go down to trees. Let's grab one of these. Can add in just the subtlest hint of some trees. And again, very soft. So we could even grab some of that. Soften it in there, like so. So now again, very subtle, very soft, but you can see some trees in there. Just something that adds to the narrative and makes you go, wow, what is that? Is that something, you know, gives somebody something to look at. Okay. So we've got those in there. So I think these all are kind of looking good. Now for the reflections, these are going to be too far back, but these two are going to be just right. So I'm going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to this one, and then I'm going to merge them together. T, flip them vertical. Something like that. I'm not going to leave this like this because I don't want a mirror perfect shoreline reflection. That'll work for now. Tell it okay. But even just that there kind of gives an interesting feel of how everything is moving back and forth and so forth. So now I'm going to break all this up. Now that I've got it there, I'm going to get rid of some of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, actually I'm going to go back to oil brush. Well, actually I'm going to go to my brush, this old brush, and I'm going to put it on, make sure it's on 4. And then I'm just going to lightly, you do this by changing some of the, I'm just going to go vertical, like so, and then I'll start softening out, but I'm going to save this for. Alright, so I've got that there. Actually, I'm going to finish this reflection here in just a second. I realized I want to name this. Like so, and I want to put it below all these others. Like so. I'm going to switch over to my wood grain brush. And again, just pull down. Just kind of scrub it up and down. Like so. keep it fairly vertical. Something like that. Now we're getting this right here because it's thinning it out, so it's showing behind it, which is that sunset. So don't worry about that. If it does that, we can fix it. We can fix everything. Just about. So that's going to give us those reflections we want. So we've still got some of those colors and all that kind of stuff in here, but we don't have all the detail now. All right. So if you're worried about this, like I said, we can fix that. Now you can do it a couple ways. One is you can duplicate it, and then that's going to fill in the gaps. Okay. The other is you can go behind it and paint. So select one of these colors. So like, for example, let me go behind it, create a new layer, and pick this darker color, like so, and then just grab something. Let's just go with the old brush. And then all we got to do is paint it in. Now, one thing we don't want to do is get a lot of that texture, so you can drop the oiliness down, and that'll help with some. Or you can go to something like the marker and just go along the shoreline and fill that in. And then once you've got all that there, you can select all three of these and merge them. So now we have the reflections merged. Everything looks pretty there. We can also go to 4 here, like for example, if you wanted to soften some of this, you could come in and soften some. Okay, don't have to, totally up to you. All right, so now we've got the reflections, we've got the mountains, the foreground. So now we need to decide what we're going to do here above that. So let's add below the rocks, let's add a new layer. And again, I'm going to go back to my stencils. I can do this freehand. I don't want to because it takes forever to draw in ripples. So that's why I made these. I can go with water ripples. I can even grab my ocean waves. So I'm going to grab this ocean waves one first. I'm going to turn off size ratio. And I'm going to stretch it out, way out. Kind of zoom this out a little bit as well. And then stretch these way out so that I can get kind of a feel and make it more horizontal. So, drag it down, paying attention, using this top line as my shoreline. I'm going to now lock the ratio, and I'm going to increase the size, like so. I can zoom in. I'll look at where my shoreline is, like so. And now what I want to do is grab a little bit of this bluish color up here for that. Airbrush works really great for this, so I'm probably just going to use it. And just really softly keeping horizontal strokes. Come in and add some. I got a little too streaky, so I'm going to... If you get streaky, like I was going to just scrubbing back and forth, zoom out, because then your hand strokes will go past it, like this. Like that. And so that's going to give us this first level of reflections. Backspace, take that out. Now I'm going to grab another stencil that I have. This one. I'm also going to turn off the lock size ratio, stretch it out, right click, bring it over. Now what I want to do here is I'm actually going to erase some of that I put in there. And use it to break up some of that. so. Size-wise, get really down and stretch it out. Border. And then move it. And maybe just slightly erase some of it. And move it around. Like so. Okay, so that's going to give me a lot of breaking up of the look of it, but let me, I'll show you here in a second so you can see it better. There's just one spot here I want to break up. So then I've got that there. Now I can go and, no. So I've got this natural V here, so I want to kind of play off of that a little bit. I'm just going to kind of fill that up. I'm going to grab a little bit of this yellow and the airbrush and kind of lay some of that in. A little bit of the orange. Kind of lay some of that in. This purplish color. Some of that in. Blue color again. Here and there. Lay some of that in. Okay. Now take the backspace, get rid of that. So see how that's really kind of bringing in some of the colors, and it's giving us some of these breaking up and really making that be more watery. Okay. Now the other thing you can do is come back to your soft brush for blending. Go a little bit larger. And then just slightly soften some of that, especially the ones kind of a little bit more in the distance. And if there's any of them that you're like, it's a little too much, like I think this yellow is a little too much, you can bring back the stencil. Again, turn off size. Stretch it out so that it more fits the perspective. You can go with your eraser and just softly knock some of it back. Like so. So that kind of matches a little better. Okay. So we've got some more of that there. So now we've got some real solid underpainting to this. We need to start doing things that are going to make this pop a little more and give it a little bit more interest. Okay. Because I mean, it's kind of cool looking, but it's still very much a, just kind of a almost one-dimensional kind of look. So we can do that. The top. Making a new layer. And you could even do this above the different ones, like, so we're going to work on the clouds and that kind of stuff. So totally up to you. But I usually do it on a new layer, so that way if I don't like it, I can get rid of it. So now what I want to do is I'm going to grab a brush, and I guess I can go back to my brushes. Let's do the cat's tongue. Okay. A little bit of this yellowish color. I'm going to click on it. And I'm going to come down, trying to stay just in line with that. Go to a lighter value. Bring the size way down. And now, remember where I talked about adding in some wispy clouds? That's what I want to do here. Now, you can see how I'm going over this mountain. That's because this is on the very top. So again, this may be where you want to just kind of lower it down. And I tell you what, let's go ahead and do that. Let's just put it behind the mountains like so, so that way we just don't even have to worry about it. Press 4. And just kind of softly add in clouds. And this is one of those things where you can just, you add it, smear it, add it, smear it. You just kind of keep building up layers. Like so, and that starts to give some interest. Come up here. You can even use some of the same color. And then switch to 4. Kind of, again, this you want to make sure you're going the same direction as these clouds. Unless you want these to look like clouds below it. And if you want these to look like clouds below it, you go a little bit different direction. That can get kind of weird and confusing, so I don't recommend it. Actually, I don't think I want. Keep that color. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to come straight across. So I'm in the same family with this now. Now I can add a little bit of this here and there. And again, this is kind of like when you're doing other stuff. Don't overly do it. Don't get rid of all your darkness. Keep the darkness. Embrace it. Anyway, so yeah, just there we go. You can even switch brushes for this part. So like say for example you wanted to go with just the old brush like we used originally. Make sure you're still on 4. Use your bracket keys. So I'm just kind of zooming out so I can see a little bit more, but I'm going to so this is about building up those subtleties. That starts to lay in that feeling of wispy clouds picking up sunlight. And don't forget all these little fellas. A bunch of angry clouds flying around. Like that.
So now I've got those going in. If you want to soften them more, you can use some of the other brushes to do so. Kind of break up any lines. Like so. So now I'm going to come back to the midground mountains. And on here, I want to really play around with some of these light getting hit on it to add some more interest. So I'm going to go to my mountain brush. I'm going to come way down in size. And I'm going to grab some of this yellow. I'm fighting this canvas. I'm going to turn this canvas off. I'm going to go to white simple. So that's a little too bright and not really working for what I need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab where it was mixing. My canvas. Because I can come back and add canvas colors if I want to. I mean, canvas textures if I want to. Now I'm just going to kind of add in. And looking here where I've got some textures. Just going to smear in some highlights. I think also I'm going to go over to my stencils. And I'm going to grab that rock stencil again. Reset that. And all I want to do here is build up some texture. I'm going to switch that color orangish. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just blending this on the canvas to get a feel for what I like. And then I can undo it. Back. So I'm just going to throw in some color here. And we'll come back and adjust this. I'm paying attention to where stuff is, but we're going to come back and clean this up. Soften some of this on the bottom and kind of smear it around a little bit to really kind of soften it out. So that way, if I want, I can bring this back and kind of lay this in here. Back to my eraser and erase out some of it. A crisp kind of interest. Like so. So that gives me a little bit more of an interesting feel. Then I can go back to my brush. And kind of soften some of the bottom edges. Then all I gotta do is click on this layer, Shift Control I, So I'm still on my mountain layer. And I can just delete anything that was overspray, like so. Okay. Now, one thing I did when I got rid of the canvas, notice how it left these weird artifacts around it. All you gotta do is go to the layer and stretch it. Do it quickly. All you need to do is select everything, throw it into a folder so that you've got it all grouped. T. Now you're selecting the entire group. And you just hit OK. And there you go. You've got all the edges cleaned up. All right. Kind of pulling that together and adding some more interest. We're going to come back to it. Right now I want to add some to these rocks. So I'm going to select them. Protect transparency. Dry brush. I'm going to select that dark color. I'm going to come over to blue, desaturate it, come up in color, and add color. And again, going back to one of my favorite stencils, you can go back to that rock stencil. Texture. Just like that. You can turn off and come back to here and go with the something like the wood grain. And then just fold this down. Like so, or you could even just use, you can really use any of these. Like if you wanted to use the mountain brush, you could. Key here is just to add a little bit of that darkness to it. Streaks of color, keeping it horizontal, like so. Then you can grab a little bit of this off color here, kind of come around, and that'll seed it in the water, like so. And then if you want to add just a little bit more, make them look wet, you can add just a touch of color reflection on the top edges. before. Kind of smear it in. You've got some nice rocks that look somewhat wet. Okay. There we go. All right. So let's go outside of the group. Add a new layer. And then add another layer. We'll call this one for highlights. And we'll go to this one. Hit shadows. And we'll put it on for the highlights. To add a glow in here. Now we've also got those markers that we can add some luminance. I'm not sure where that went away, but okay. Switch to airbrush. Streak this out, but not necessarily that bright. Maybe something like that. Here, this highlights, go to our eraser, makes sense. Like so. So that makes this really pop over here, keeps that in shadow. Also select here, again being on Shift Control I. Makes sense. So that gives us a really nice, interesting pop of color there. So I'd like to come under here. A little bit of pop, just like that. And then soften it. And soften that. And this here, I'm going to select that again. I'm going to come back up to the highlights with my eraser. Oops. Back up this layer, Shift Control I, and get rid of behind there. Because I want that to be darker behind it so it pops a little more. And I can Shift Control I again and come back over, grab some of this yellow. Add in. a bit more of a pop. Come down here. Add some of that. Grab the water stencil again. Something like that. Now I'm going to come up to shadows. It's bluish color. I'm going to bring it down. Tell it okay. And now I want to bring in just a few spots of shadow. Like so. And drop stuff behind. Now I'm going to bring this down below rocks. And the highlights I'm going to keep above the rocks. But that's going to give me a more interesting kind of feel. I do want to soften this. All right, so now that I've got all that done, now what I want to do is I want to come back to this canvas, add that back in, like so. A few other things I want to do to kind of straighten some stuff up here. And let's kind of soften this back. It's got some weird texture to it when I change the canvases. I've not had to do that before. This is another reason to keep it on layers. So I think that's going to give us kind of an interesting sunset, sunscape. I want to add, it's not quite enough glow here either, so I'm going to add that here. So let me switch over to there we go. I'm going to grab some of these other colors. I'll throw them in here and there. I'll pull some of this together. Something like that. little bit of warm shadows here and there. I think that'll work. Now I want to do just something down here I want to play around with for a second. So let me grab one more rock, my pebbles one. This, stretch it way out. And just the softest. I wanted to add some pebbles, shadows and stuff, but I don't like how it looks on that layer, so I'm going to change it. There we go. So let me put it down here. Okay, I kind of like how that breaks that up. So now I'm going to come back up here to my highlights. It's a little too bright. Yeah, there we go. I think that's going to work. I'm going to go with my pencil. I'm going to zoom in, make a new layer. And what I want to do here that's too bright. I just want to cut in some water lines. Kind of coming around these rocks. And again with this, try to stay fairly horizontal. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just kind of cut it in. Like that. Yeah, I think that's going to add that in. So let's add a couple more little small things, and I think we'll call it done. So I think I would like to add in some birds. Let's go to the airbrush, bring that down. And hit it once. different color. That. And we'll hit it with a little bit. It'll just give some variation. Throw in a few spots of color. All right, so I think we might call this one done. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope you got something out of this and that you enjoyed the process with it. Trying to do, some different colors, some lights, darks, some drama. Just something a little bit fun to play around with and get some ideas of how you can get some real nice, subtle, soft effects here and there for light cascading out. So, as always, let me know what questions you have. Thanks for watching.